Welcome to the Dynasty 365 show. I'm your host, Stacey Perez. In the house tonight, we have got Tyler Heil, and our special guest tonight is Nate Polvogt. He is here from Fantasy Pros, the Dynasty Diehard podcast, among many others. Guys, tonight we're going to be answering your burning questions about your favorite NFL players. Tyler, hit that music. Everybody, before we get started, please remember to jump on over to that subscribe button and hit that so you can get all of our news and notifications here at Fantasy and Frames. Make sure to check us out online, on Twitter, on our website, fantasyandframes.com, for more amazing fantasy football content from all of us here at Fantasy and Frames. So tonight we have got Nate Polvogt here from, like I said, Fantasy Pros, Dynasty Diehard podcast. I've got all kinds of stuff for you, Nate. Razzball, the Faceoff Sports Network. I'm sure I'm missing something. Hey guys, if you're not following Nate already, you can see his handle down here on the screen at Nate Polvogt. Make sure to jump on there and do that. Nate, like, what else you've got so many things going on. What did I miss?
You actually didn't miss. There's one thing. I've been doing betting content for a local entity called the Sports Forum at Denver Forum on Twitter, which has been fun. But otherwise, I've actually slimmed down recently. I cut a couple of things out. I was at Player Profiler for a little bit. I was with In Between Media for 3 years. I'm narrowing my focus, trying to get a little bit more focused on the few things I have going on. But thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited. This is a great group of people, great company. If you guys aren't following Fantasy and Frames on Twitter, make sure you're doing it now.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming and hanging out with us tonight. This is going to be a fun show. I have a good feeling about our show tonight. But before we get into our friendly banter portion, Nate, I saw a post from you earlier today about slow drafts and people not having patience, getting all upset about slow drafts. And I just had to tell you, I felt that like right here, because I'm in a draft right now. And there is a certain person in the draft who shall remain nameless, but they literally count the hours between each pick and then post them in our chat and say, it's been 32 hours since my last pick. And I got to tell you, he has not made any friends.
So here's the thing. You go into a slow draft in May or June, knowing it's a slow draft, right?
Huh.
The NFL season doesn't start until the first, maybe second week of September. What are you all so worried about? Right. Just let it play out. My wife has a big pet peeve. If you're not following her on Twitter, at Jen Polvogt, she's awesome. She's in the industry as well. She hates drafting this early because we'll call it the Breece Hall effect, where you draft this guy super early because you're high on him in a rookie draft. Then he tears his ACL and misses most of the season. We've seen it so many times. Slow drafts, it's a slow draft. It's what's in the name.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to pick in 20 minutes. I'm in 20 leagues. So there's a good chance that I'm drafting in 5 at a time. And I think a lot of people in the Dynasty community are in the same boat, right? This is all supposed to be fun. Just don't be a dick about it. Like, sometimes it takes time. Like, I have a kid. It takes me time to draft sometimes. I don't want to use the whole 8-hour clock. Sometimes I do. Don't yell at me for it.
Thank you. Tyler, do you have any strong feelings one way or another on slow drafts?
Yeah, I sure do. And I agree with Nate. Not only can you apply it to slow drafts, but you can apply it to life. Don't be a dick. It's not that hard.
Very much
really
so.
Not that
Very
complicated.
much so.
It
is for some people. Who knows why?
That could be a whole nother show, but not today. All right, so it is time for friendly banter. So this is where I pick something really random that we get to talk about before we talk about our real topic. So again, I was doing a little bit more creeping on your Twitter just to prep our show sheet. And I saw that you had answered a question about favorite players to acquire right now at market value. And you mentioned Jordan Love, which near and dear to my heart as a Packer fan back here. So I wanted to ask you, why Jordan Love?
So I do a lot of mock drafts for my writing at Fantasy Pros. And he is consistently going round 16, 17, and 18 in a 20-pick draft. He's a starting quarterback on a team with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and they picked up Luke Musgrave in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's flush with weapons, and this team held on to him through the Aaron Rodgers years. And it seemed that they were prepared, should Aaron Rodgers come back for 2023, to continue to retain Jordan Love. I don't know if a lot of people will remember what happened when Brett Favre was in Green Bay. I do, because I'm old. I'm 41, and I remember that period very specifically where Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre for 4 seasons. It doesn't matter. Jordan Love is a talented quarterback. This is a team that believes in him. And it's a team with a track record of understanding talent. They always win. They always at least sniff the playoffs. They don't make the playoffs. So they're going with Jordan Love as their starting quarterback. Sure, he doesn't have a ton of experience, but neither did Aaron Rodgers when he finally got the starting nod, because it had been Brett Favre for years. I believe that this team sees in him what they saw in Aaron Rodgers back in the Brett Favre days. Will he live up to that? I don't know. But I think it's enough for me to say, if he's going in the 19th round and he's my QB2, that's pretty good value for a guy who could be a top 15 to 20 quarterback. And in Superflex, that's what you're looking for at your second quarterback. Plain and simple, the value's there. And while there's a lot of unknowns with Jordan Love, the situation is perfect for him to excel. So it's a gamble, but it's a gamble in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th round.
God, that gives me hope as a Packer fan. Thank you.
I'm here to help. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Peter wants to get you in our mock drafts, so we'll have to get you one of those soon.
I mock draft all day, so let's go.
Oh, yeah. We're at like 110 or something like that for the Scott Fishbowl mock drafts.
Nice. Oh yeah, no. Nate asked me to do your 100th. I was really bummed because the night just it didn't work out, but I wanted to draft with my fellow Nate. The Scott Fishbowl thing is interesting too, because Jordan Love is going undrafted, largely in Scott Fishbowl. This is a guy that, again, even in the Scott Fishbowl scoring, which is wacky this year, all plus scoring, no negative scoring, Jordan Love could be a guy who's QB 10 in that format. That's
amazing. Tyler, have you got the ADP pulled up? Tyler put together some ADP for the Fishbowl based on our mock drafts.
Yeah, every time a new mock draft goes up, I'm like, God damn it.
All day, every day.
His ADP in our mock drafts is 95.
Okay.
His highest draft position was 61, lowest was 128. So big range.
Yeah.
Big range. Yeah. Scott Fishbowl drafters tend to be pretty savvy. So you got to give them that.
Yeah.
True. All right, Tyler. Now, you don't play by the rules, so you have 3 players that you want to talk about. So let's go. Let's do them.
I do not. So I was thinking of multiple scenarios here. I'm like, all right, who do I want if I'm trying to win now? Who would I want to go out and acquire right now if I'm trying to win this season? And the easy running back picks for me were James Conner and Samaje Perine. I mean, Conner, according to, Trade Analyzer, take it for what it's worth, it's DLF. He's worth less than a 24 second round pick, James Conner is. Samaje Perine worth less than a 24 third round pick. Now, is that value going to happen in your league? Maybe, maybe not. But if they're even close to that value, I would love both of them. Perine's going to have a role in that Denver offense. James Conner is the Arizona offense pretty much.
He's it.
Yeah. If he stays on the field, I would say he's likely an RB1. I would put money on that. The other guy that I had he would still be good for win now, but someone that I think their value can seriously go up from what it is right now is Brandon Ayuk. He's wide receiver 29 in DLF ADP right now. He's 11 spots behind Deebo Samuel, which is kind of crazy to me. Deebo had that one absolutely bonkers year because he was playing 2 positions, and now the 49ers have someone named Christian McCaffrey to play the running back position for them. So I don't think Deebo will be doing much of that. Not only would I take Brandon Ayuk over Deebo Samuel at value right now, I would take them in a vacuum, flat out. Just give me Ayuk over Deebo.
I love this because I've been saying this for 2-3 months at this point.
Nice.
They've got Christian McCaffrey. Like Deebo Samuel's one season was fantastic. And I will always love to have been a part of that season in fantasy and in real life as a football fan, but it's not repeatable. And people keep waiting for it to be repeated, and he's just being drafted too high.
Yeah, it seems like the rule of cool applies there. Like Deebo Samuel's cool as hell, but he's just not going to be all that productive for fantasy.
No, well, I think it goes back to like one of my rules about the 49ers is that you can't trust Kyle Shanahan, right? Like he's not going to stick with one person. He's going to rotate. There's going to be a whole, like you're going to even get some Elijah Mitchell up in there. So, that's, I'm with you on Ayuk. I'm a big Ayuk fan.
Could you imagine dating or being married to Kyle Shanahan? Just the temper tantrums that would be thrown.
God,
Good
no.
Lord.
God, no. That sounds awful.
Maybe later in July, once we get like really desperate for some NFL news, like we can do a show like ranking the like coaches that it'd be worse to be like married to or dating.
Bill Belichick's number one, right? Like consensus 101 has to be Bill Belichick. Has to be.
Totally has to be. Yeah, absolutely. I think
I'm probably putting Mike McCarthy at 102.
He just seems boring, right? He doesn't seem like a good time.
Well, he is. He's like, I just want to run the ball. Let's just run the ball. Boring.
No.
Get out of here.
I think Andy Reid would be a good time because you would go to so many fun places to eat all the time, right?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
You eat so well, just constantly.
Right? Yeah, you would.
5 meals a day.
If I was married to Andy Reid, I'd die of a heart attack at 50. But, dude, the food would be epic.
You would have enjoyed getting to that
Exactly.
part. Oh, my gosh. All right, guys. Come back in July for a deep dive on our NFL coaches. I'm going to write that down because that's great. All right. So
fun.
I've been dying for a chance to go off on this rant, and I'm glad that I gave it to myself here. That's what happens when you get to write the show sheet. So Dawson Knox is my player that I think is being incredibly undervalued. All right, I got some feelings. Let me get ready here. Okay. So we have the number one. I would hire myself. You're absolutely right. Gator. So we have the number one tight end on an elite offense with the Bills. Okay. He's been there for 4 years. He signed an extension for a big money deal. I think it was like $52 million. He's going to be there till 2026, right? So he's got rapport with his quarterback. He is established in that offense. He's basically free in drafts right now, which I don't understand. And I mean, that's across all formats, not just Dynasty. I'm seeing it in best ball. I'm seeing it in redraft. I'm seeing it everywhere. There's just utter and complete disrespect to Dawson Knox because, we've got an unproven shiny toy in Dalton Kincaid over here, which is fine. It's not that I don't like Dalton Kincaid. I like Dalton Kincaid. I think he's a fun player. I think he'll be fun to watch on Sundays with the Bills. But here's the deal. I think that him going above Dawson Knox right now is just absolutely absurd. I'm going to channel my inner Taylor Swift here and be like, y'all need to calm down with the Dalton Kincaid. Okay. They've got Diggs. They've got Gabe Dave. They've got James Cook, Damian Harris, and Dawson Knox to feed all before they feed this new rookie tight end in a position, right? The tight end position with rookies notorious for low production in their rookie years. So, I mean, as long as everybody out there wants to keep taking, Dalton Kincaid in the 11th round, way, way, way before Dawson Knox, I'm fine with it because I will be thrilled to sit back and grab Dawson Knox as my number one after all the other guys have gone. Right now, I looked up the ADP for him in Dynasty. So for Fantasy Pros, has Kincaid as the 11th overall tight end and Knox as the 22nd. Do you know who he's behind?
Who?
Taysom Hill. He's behind Taysom Hill, people. Okay. We got to get our heads straight here. Like, I don't know what else to say, but like behind Taysom Hill, that is criminal. So I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox now.
So it's funny that you bring this up because we just talked about, I just did a whole show on tight ends. It was all tight end tiers with Matt Chester and Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm. Dalton Kincaid is ranked way too high. I love the talent. He's going to be a slot guy in this offense, which is a problem because they've already got Khalil Shakir, who is likely going to take over the majority of those slot snaps. He's not an inline guy. Dawson Knox is more of an inline tight end. He can work slot, but more than 50% of his snaps last season were in line, 461 of 948. You pepper in some, we got special teams, we've got some backfield snaps, but the majority of the time he was in line. For Dalton Kincaid to succeed, that means that he needs to be a slot receiver, which Coach Speak says he's going to be. The reality of it, we've seen this before. We saw it with Kyle Pitts his rookie season. Yeah, no, we're going to use him as a wide receiver. We keep hearing coaches say this, and people are buying into it again. Yeah. Dawson Knox, while touchdown dependent, he's touchdown dependent in an offense that produces a lot of touchdowns.
Right.
And his red zone acumen doesn't just go away with bringing in Dalton Kincaid. So I like this, Stacey. I like this a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't understand. I feel like I hear everybody saying this and everything that I'm listening to, right? And everything I'm reading, seeing on Twitter. And yeah, I go into these drafts and we're still taking Dalton Kincaid way, 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 way too high. So everybody, actually keep doing it. Everybody else keep doing it. And I'll just it with us. That's fine. Guys, I see you guys all in the chat over there. Make sure you're throwing in your questions for us tonight. Put them on in there and we will get right to them. So tonight's show is kind of all about questions. So we're going to be doing questions about guys going into the season, things that we're wondering out there, what's going on with these guys, how are they going to be this season, and kind of talking about a few of our special players here. So Nate, I'm going to start with you. Speaking of the Bills, we got the diva from up north, Stephon Diggs. How are we feeling about him?
I'm not feeling great about Stephon Diggs, Stacey, and here's why. I don't like the drama because that tends to insert itself into a locker room, and if it becomes too egregious, it affects the feeling of a team, and you might have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have a cohesive locker room, that becomes a problem. We've seen it with teams like the Raiders have had horrible locker rooms. They've had all the talent in the world, but they can't get over themselves because the attitudes. You bring in a guy like Antonio Brown, causes problems. Now, Stephon Diggs isn't Antonio Brown. Okay, first of all, he's not nearly as talented as Antonio Brown was in his prime. I think we can all agree on that. But also, he's not as much of a diva. But the issue is he has issues with his quarterback. And do you want a wide receiver that's pissed off at their quarterback for not getting enough work? Like, you should have been throwing the ball to me in the playoffs. Why weren't you targeting me? Why weren't you? This is all an issue. And they might work it out before the season starts, and they probably will. But I feel like Stephon Diggs is irritated and is going to play at 75%. We've seen receivers do this in the past. We saw Antonio Brown do it at the end in Tampa Bay where he didn't feel like he was being targeted enough, so he took off his shirt and walked off the field, right? Plus, you add in the fact that he's going to be 30 heading into this season, 30 at the end of November, right? That's the wide receiver cliff. This is where production drops in fantasy. We saw it with pretty much everyone but Larry Fitzgerald and maybe Jerry Rice and Tim Brown, if you want to go way back. This is the cliff. And with everything he's been doing and all the things he's been saying, I don't think he wants to be a Buffalo Bill. I don't think he thinks this is a team that can get over that hump and get to a Super Bowl. They made some moves. They got Damian Harris. That didn't appease him. They didn't add an elite wide receiver. That didn't appease him. Dalton Kincaid, who we just talked about, might end up taking over some of Stephon Diggs' targets this season. And we saw the dip in his play at the end of last season when he had an issue with what was happening with the team. I'm afraid that's the entirety of 2023, but he's still being drafted in the second round.
Oh, sometimes the first, too.
Sometimes the first, yeah.
Do you think, let me ask you about this. Do you think that he's just being a diva, or do you think there's some legitimacy to his concerns?
I think he's being a diva. This is a team that's trying to win. That doesn't always mean that you lead the team in targets. You got to be a team player. You look at back in history, guys like John Taylor could have been an elite wide receiver, but he was behind Jerry Rice. But he was okay with that because he won 4 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs doesn't seem like that kind of selfless player, and I just see this causing problems overall. I don't think he's going to be appeased. I think he wants to be Mr. Hollywood in Buffalo, New York, and that's the problem.
All right. So we've got a question from Jamie real quick before we do your player, Tyler. Tyler, do you want to jump on this? Thoughts on Jaden Reed if he could outproduce Romeo Doubs and take over as that number 1 or number 2 receiver in Green Bay? How you feel about that?
Sure. First, let me say Jamie apparently got his Scott Fishbowl 13 invite on the 100th mock draft. So that's exciting stuff.
That's awesome.
True. I was there for that. Yeah, he did. That was great. Yeah, Ryan got that done for him in the mock draft. That was awesome.
That's awesome. And Jamie actually bought me a Jerome Ford jersey, so there might be one coming in. Yeah, because I stand for Jerome Ford like a month ago.
That's awesome.
Jamie, friend of the pod.
Absolutely. All right. To answer the question, yes, I mean, I do think that. Romeo Dobbs. I think, I don't know, they changed the pronunciation like once a month, I think. But I liked him coming out of Nevada. He was productive. He was good catching the ball deep. It was a 3rd round pick, if I remember correctly. So correct me if I'm wrong, please. If they really felt that strongly about Romeo Dobbs, I don't know if they would have gone out to get Jaden Reed. And just on top of the capital invested in Jaden Reed, who was a 2nd round pick for the Packers, I don't know if we said that. They both play for the Green Bay Packers. But I loved Jaden Reed. I loved him coming out of Michigan State. He can get open every single time he runs a route. He's got nice hands. He's really good with the ball in his hands. So I already think he might be better than Romeo Dobbs. We'll find out. Dobbs has been a professional for longer. He's been on the team for longer. He knows the offense better. He might have a rapport with Jordan Love. So that could be an obstacle to overcome. Talent-wise, I think Jaden Reed is the better player.
Ooh, Nate, what do you think?
So do you remember that point last year when everybody was saying Romeo Dobbs over Christian Watson?
I do.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That didn't happen. And there's a reason that didn't happen. It's because Aaron Rodgers trusted Christian Watson over Romeo Dobbs. And there's a reason for that. And to your point, Tyler, why did they draft Jalen Reed if they believed in Romeo Dobbs? I think there's 100% a chance this could happen. I think it'd be silly to discount it.
Oh yeah, I've been very hesitant in drafts. Like, do you take Reed? Do you take Dobbs? It's just one of those that is definitely a question, which is exactly what we're talking about tonight. So thank you, Jamie. That was an excellent question. Guys, keep them coming. Tyler, who's your first guy?
All right, I was very excited when I saw this topic because I've been passionate about this guy being undervalued for several months now, and I think Christian Kirk, people have a lot of questions about. Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Christian Kirk. The main concern with him is, they're bringing in Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is likely the new wide receiver 1. So Kirk's going to kind of fade away into obscurity. Nay, I say. Christian Kirk will not fade away into obscurity. He finished last season as the wide receiver 11 overall. Wasn't as good in points per game, but he was consistent. He was good for you every week, and he just flat out performed. Okay, let's throw in Calvin Ridley into this mix with what I consider to be a high-powered offense with a up-and-coming quarterback that could very well be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL after this season. And receivers-wise, let's look at what the Jacksonville Jaguars looked like last year of their top 4 target getters / wide receivers / pass catchers. Christian Kirk was number 1 with 133. Zay Jones was number 2 with 121. Evan Ingram was number 3 with 98. And Marvin Jones was number 4 with 81. Marvin Jones is no longer on this team. Christian Kirk, he played 754 snaps in the slot last year out of 1,113. I did not do the math, but that is about 70% in the slot. Marvin Jones played almost all of his snaps out wide, 695 out of 807. Zay Jones played almost all of his snaps out wide, 726 out of 1,059. Calvin Ridley is an exclusively out wide player. He plays 80 to 85% of his snaps out wide. Calvin Ridley, his production will be there. It will not be affecting Christian Kirk hardly in the slightest. Maybe his targets go down a little bit, which is fine because of what Christian Kirk has been in the past. He's been a big play guy in the past. He's been an explosive player. He's good with the ball in his hands. He did not get the opportunity to do that on the 2022 Jaguars. You can just look at his ADOT from his career. 2020, his ADOT was 11.8. 2021 is 11.6. 2022 is 9.1. It dropped by 2.5 yards because of the role he had to play, because of the other wide receivers in that room. Calvin Ridley is going to fill that intermediate to short role, giving Christian Kirk the chance to focus on what he's very good at, and that's further down the field. So will his volume go down a little bit? Maybe. I tend to think it's going to be all of Marvin Jones's opportunities, and Zay Jones, he outperformed what we thought he would, but he's still Zay Jones.
Right.
So give me Christian Kirk at wide receiver 29. He will outperform that all day. And not to mention his contract. He has a nice contract, at least for him and for his fantasy value. He's under contract. He's basically not cuttable or tradable for the next 2 years. And then when you get into 2024, he is probably their prime restructure candidate, which, if anyone knows anything about contract structure, that pushes guaranteed money into future years, making players less likely to be moved or cut and more likely to be on that roster and producing. So I see Christian Kirk as a 26-year-old wide receiver that is going to be on a very high-powered offense and be the 1B to Calvin Ridley's 1A for the next 3 years. So I'm all about that. And I did get his ADP wrong. He's wide receiver 31, not 29. So, yeah, give me Christian Kirk all day.
Well, I just had that in my notes, too. I mean, obviously, they paid him a ton of money. I mean, they're planning on using him. They have confidence in his ability, and they want him to be a big part of that offense. So I think, what do they say? You got to follow the money, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, guys. So, Nate, do you want to jump in?
Just real quick, couple of things, because I love this, Tyler. Now, the follow the money thing I don't necessarily prescribe to, because Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, I mean, they got paid. Okay. They were terrible. However, Christian Kirk isn't terrible, and he's on an offense that last season threw the ball 59.4% of plays. 59.4% of offensive snaps, Jacksonville threw the ball. They just brought in why this is escaping me.
Tank Bigsby.
Tank Bigsby. Thank you. They just brought in Tank Bigsby, who's more of a power runner than Travis Etienne, but I still think they're going to throw the ball more next season. I think this is a team that approaches 70% of offensive snaps or pass plays, kind of around like that Chargers, Tampa Bay, Minnesota percentage. And if that happens, you're talking about an offense where Evan Ingram is relevant, Christian Kirk is relevant, and Calvin Ridley are relevant in fantasy. And that's not that crazy. And this is Doug Peterson. We know what Doug Peterson likes to do. He likes to throw the freaking ball. So I love this because people are dinging Christian Kirk like, well, they got Calvin Ridley and Evan Ingram played so well. They held on. It doesn't matter. This is going to be a high volume passing offense, and Christian Kirk, is going to be a huge beneficiary because, like you said, he's the deep ball guy. His ADOT increases. His target share might decrease. With that increase in ADOT, you're talking about more yards and touchdowns.
Absolutely. Yes. Amen.
All right, guys. So here's my player. I'm going to talk about Kyler Murray. And the two guys that I picked tonight were guys that I don't necessarily love and haven't been taking a lot of. And I kind of wanted to do a little bit deeper dive to find out whether or not I was just being ridiculous or if there was some reasoning back there behind it. So one, Kyler Murray, right? He's 26 years. He's going to be 26 by the time the season rolls around. He played 11 games last year because of his injury, right? So he had 2,363 yards, 14 touchdowns. So obviously not great. He only played 11 games, though. We know that. So big question for me, is he going to start the season? Answer is no. He tore his ACL week 14. That was December 12th. His surgery wasn't until January 3rd. So our timeline, right, on return, not so sure about that, but typically what are we looking at for ACLs? 8 to 9 months, something like that at least. So is he going to start the season? No. Even bigger question for me, is he even going to play this season? And I tend to think, no, exactly, Nate. I don't think he is going to play.
Nope.
Why would he, right? So he's coming back from this knee injury. Why would you rush it? The Cardinals are not going to be anywhere near expected to be at the top of their division, competing in their division. I think it's going to be nice that they just even show up this year. I think everybody else is going to appreciate having the Cardinals on their schedule. So my answer is no. He's not going to play this season, which leads me to another question I have is how much longer is he actually going to be a Cardinal, right? So I saw a stat from ESPN that the Cardinals have a 31% chance of having the number 1 overall pick next year. 31% because they have their own pick, right? And then they also have the Texans pick. So Cardinals probably going to be really bad. Texans have a good chance of being real bad too. So between those 2 picks, they're going to get real high, if not the number 1. So they could be really making an eye for Caleb Williams, right? I mean, maybe they're ready to move on for Kyler. I kind of tend to think that that's how it is. They have a new coach there, sure. He's not the one who drafted Kyler. He's, of course, saying all the right things. We want to, build an offense around Kyler. I don't know that I necessarily buy that. I think they're ready to move on. I think they're ready to try something else. And if that's the case, why would you risk your guy right now, such a, high pick coming out, your star quarterback? Why would you risk injuring him, rushing him back, so soon if you could be eyeing him, to trade him and ruin his trade value? So I think you kind of have to say to yourself, like, what do we do with him now? Right. And if you're a dynasty player, you've got Kyler Murray on your team, I think you have to ask yourself, are we in win now mode? Right. Because if you're not, hang on to him, see where he goes, see what happens, see what new situation he ends up in next year. But if you are in win now mode, maybe you move him, right? Like, so our Fantasy and Frames Dynasty Consensus, which you can find on our site, nice little plug there, fantasyandframes.com. They have him as quarterback 11. So Jorge is higher at 10. Tyler, you have him at 13. Do you think it's time to consider moving on from Kyler, given, what could potentially happen next year?
Yeah, it's always time to consider moving on from all players in Dynasty. That's how you stay productive.
Yep.
Otherwise, let me just say, Jamie actually said what I was thinking about will he play. I feel like you want to play him near the end of the season, drive up his trade value a little bit, because if they truly are in a position to get the number 1 pick, why not? Maybe do right by your player. Don't force him to sit on the bench, even though he hasn't really done right by you. But, that organization is in a little bit of a, need for good PR. So maybe do right by the players every once in a while, which is why they cut DeAndre Hopkins. Anyway, to answer the question, yeah, I think you can consider moving on from Kyler, but I also don't think Kyler is going to fade away into obscurity. Maybe he gets traded, maybe he goes somewhere else. He's a good player. He's not a bad quarterback. He's a really good fantasy player. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he took the Cardinals to the playoffs basically single-handedly in 2021. So he's a viable NFL quarterback. So he's not just going to be valueless. So let's treat him like he's going to have value in the future as well.
I know that kind of sounds a little like down in the dumps for Kyler Murray. I definitely don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just think his time in Arizona has probably come to an end, just based on the tea leaves that I'm kind of reading. Like, how do you feel about Kyler? Do you have anything else do you think that could pop up potentially?
Kyler should have played baseball.
Yes.
He's a good NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's a great NFL quarterback. His size limits what he can do, unfortunately. I like him as a player. What concerns me is his attitude and this perception that, Call of Duty came out this week. Well, Kyler's going to suck because he's not going to practice. He's just going to play Call of Duty. Baseball, you don't have to think a whole ton. And I can say that without being a dick because I played baseball for a really long time. There's very little game day prep that goes into playing shortstop. Okay. Plain and simple. You have to understand the picture. He's working a game plan all week. I don't think this was in his plans. I think he thought, well, I can get to the NFL, make a bunch of money, be an all-star, and just, ball out like I did in college because you don't have to think about it a lot. This is an easy sport. It comes easy to me. He's found that the NFL is more difficult for him, and that concerns me. That concerns me for him long term, that he's not going to stick around. Like, he got a huge payday. He's got a ton of guaranteed money. If he's not having fun, what's his motivation to keep playing? And I don't feel like he's having fun at this point. Maybe they trade him. That's going to be a hard trade, though, because that's a big contract. It's a really big contract. And if you're looking at it as a GM or an owner, like, I'm not 100% sold that this guy loves the game. Why would I take on this contract? So in that respect, I'm concerned. I hope that we see Kyler Murray turn it around, because when he plays and he focuses, he plays really well. He's capable of leading a team into the playoffs. I don't know if he's Super Bowl caliber quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm off Kyler Murray. I traded all of my shares last season. I have 0 shares across 20 plus dynasty leagues of Kyler Murray. I want nothing to do with it. It's a bad situation, and I could see Jonathan Gannon wanting to move off of him, not his quarterback.
Yeah. I think now, if you're going to trade him, I think now's a great time to do that. Those of you in the chat, bonus points if you can tell us who actually drafted Kyler Murray in the MLB. So everybody start looking.
I know.
I know.
No. It said in the chat. We'll see. I'll let you two decide who's right. So guys, go for it. Dig in on that Google. All right, Nate. So you are up with player number 2. You've got somebody near and dear to my heart. Who is it?
I'm sorry, but it's Davante Adams. I'm not a fan this year. I wasn't last year either. I don't like the situation in Oakland. Good God, Las Vegas. I had Oakland on my brain. I won't tell you why.
We all knew what you thought.
I don't like Josh McDaniels. And I got burned as a Broncos fan by Josh McDaniels early on in his head coaching career. But he's proven that he's not a good coach. He's a great offensive coordinator. He should not be leading a team. The Raiders were putrid last season. And what did they do? Get rid of one of their best assets in Derek Carr and bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, who is a Hall of Fame temporary bridge quarterback. That's what he does best, right? There's an interesting stat, and I wrote about this for Fantasy Pros a few weeks ago, why I'm completely off on Davante Adams. Davante Adams thrives with a higher ADOT, right? Mm-hmm. Derek Carr throws deep balls. Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't. Jimmy Garoppolo ranked 34th in QB ADOT last season, 34th, whereas Derek Carr ranked 9th. That's a big difference. I'm sorry, Derek Carr ranked 5th. Davante Adams ranked 9th in receiver ADOT. He needs those deep balls to be relevant. We don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is even going to start the season, which then leaves an even worse situation where you've got Brian Hoyer as the starter, right? This is all bad for Davante Adams. And not only that, they went out, they got Mike Mayer in the draft. They still have Hunter Renfrow. They acquired Jacoby Myers. What is this team? What is this offense? I don't understand it. And Davante Adams is going to be 31 towards the end of the season. That wide receiver cliff at 30, you start to see it. And I get it, because when I turned 30, I couldn't cut the same anymore either. Like, it was bad. Like, I couldn't run flag routes anymore. My slants were trash. Button hooks, forget about it. I'm just worried that Davante Adams he's been so great, but it's the same way I feel about Mike Evans this season. I love your past. Dude is talented as hell. Mm-hmm. I am unloading him in Dynasty. And it's the same with Davante Adams, because I just don't think it's possible this season. Yes, he's a freak athlete, but when you put yourself in a situation with a quarterback who doesn't throw the deep ball that you need, he doesn't get the ball down the field, because Garoppolo just simply doesn't do that. No. That's a problem for guys like him. It's a bad situation. Yes, and that is correct, Jamie. That's why I said Oakland. This is just a bad situation in Las Vegas. These players outside of Josh Jacobs, and I'm even concerned a little bit about Josh Jacobs. I want nothing to do with this offense outside of Josh Jacobs. Yeah, period.
I totally feel that. What would your opinion change? And I don't even know if for some reason Davante gets traded, goes somewhere else. How would you feel about him?
It depends on where he goes. Mm-hmm. I'd be open to revisiting his dynasty value if he gets traded. But at this point, he's more of a win now guy if he does get traded. Because again, he's 31. He's not Jerry Rice. He's not going to play until he's 40 for 8 different franchises like Jerry did. His clock, the clock's ticking on Davante Adams' career. And this is a season where the situation sucks, and I don't want anything to do with him in fantasy.
Yeah, it's not great. in Vegas. Tyler, you've got a really fun two guys actually that you're talking about now.
I do. So you actually put this on there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm taking this. I'm jumping all over this. I know
absolutely. I know my audience.
And I know Nate is going to argue with me here in a little bit, but I took the topic of Roschon Johnson versus Khalil Herbert. And I also feel passionately about this, and I feel passionately about this player in Khalil Herbert. First thing we got to remember is D'Onta Foreman is on this team too. So right now, Roschon Johnson is third on this depth chart. I like Roschon Johnson. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to poo-poo on Roschon Johnson, but what I want to do is hype up Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert, his season narrative last year, let me just run you through it. Wasn't used a lot first two games of the season. David Montgomery went down week 3. Herbert went off in that game. He went for 20 for 157 and 2. Monty comes back in week 5. A couple weeks of him, he's not doing great. Herbert comes in. They nearly split their work in week 7 to 10, 53 carries to 45 carries. And Herbert is extremely effective. Nope. I think I messed up in my notes, but I know Herbert got hurt, not Monty, because Monty had already got hurt that season. But Herbert got hurt, missed 4 games. Came back, he was effective the last couple games of the season. I understand the narrative of why not Khalil Herbert. They didn't draft him. He's a 5th round pick. But you know what? Khalil Herbert is the Tony Pollard from last year. He's this super effective backup that people want to see given a better chance. And when I say super effective, I mean super effective. He was second in the NFL in yards after contact per attempt. So if you want to put that into context, what that means is how many yards he gained after he got hit, not how many yards were blocked for him. He was second with 2.5. The only player that was better than him that had 100 or more attempts was Tony Pollard with 2.6. So was he effective after contact? Yes, absolutely. He was 11th in the NFL in attempts per broken tackle. So how many attempts does it take for him to break a tackle? Is 14.3. And this again is players over 100 attempts. And he was, out of the running backs in the NFL, because we're not counting the quarterbacks here, he had the best yards per carry of anyone in the NFL. Full stop. He was the best. He had 5.7 with 129 carries. So he's a super effective back. He's extremely efficient. I would love to see him be given more work. I think he's going to earn that work just off of what he's done. He's returned kicks for that team. He's been everything that they need him to be. And also just to kind of poo-poo the Roschon Johnson train, we need to stop trying to make fetch happen. Just listening to Regina George here. All right. I get it. He was Bijan's backup. Everyone wants to be the one that was right about Roschon Johnson being awesome. I liked it. I liked his film. I really do. He was a backup in college. He doesn't have any dominator rating or early breakout age to point to. That's super fantastic. His athleticism is fine. Outside of, hey, he's pretty good on film, Roschon Johnson doesn't really have a case for being the guy that's going to be the top running back in Chicago. And I will die on that hill.
Nate, I feel like you're ready to take your Gatorade bucket full of cold water and just pour it all over that take. Uh-oh.
Nate lost audio.
Uh-oh. Did you do that on purpose?
Whoa. No. So I love Khalil Herbert. Don't get me wrong. I think he's ultra talented. All the metrics that you pointed to are something that I spout when I'm talking about Khalil Herbert. I mean, the yards after carry per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, that's an impressive stat for a guy who's not he's not Derrick Henry size running back. He's just elusive. And they did get Deontay Foreman this year, which is an interesting acquisition for me. With Roschon, though, I feel like this is a guy who it's like Terrell Davis, if you remember. Terrell Davis was a 6th-round pick out of Georgia.
He's a Hall of Famer.
He's a Hall of Famer. But he was okay. So I'm not saying that Roschon Johnson is a Hall of Famer. What I'm saying is there are these guys who sometimes slip to the back of the draft because they're not the marquee back at their school. Terrell Davis was not the lead back at Georgia when he was drafted by the Broncos. Mike Shanahan saw something in him and was like, we need this guy in our offense. He's going to help us win. I feel like that's where the Bears are with Roschon Johnson. And it might not be this season. It might be next season. It might be the season after. This is a guy who has the talent to take over the backfield. That said, Khalil Herbert is a guy that you want this season because of the efficiency and because the dude is a great pass catcher, which is something Deontay Foreman is not. Deontay Foreman is a runner. He's in between the tackles. He can get outside the tackles, whatever, doesn't catch passes. Khalil Herbert will be a huge part of this offense. And I feel like there's a point where Roschon Johnson might also become a big part of this offense, but that'll be to the detriment of Deontay Foreman, not Khalil Herbert, because they're two different types of backs. I think they can exist in this backfield and both be incredibly fantasy relevant, even to the tune of one of them being an RB1, not this season, but I mean, maybe Khalil Herbert this season. But in 2024 and 2025, I think we're talking about, man, this Bears backfield is ridiculous. They've got Roschon, they've got Khalil. We can't stop them. Who can stop them?
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Roschon Johnson, NFL Hall of Famer. Nate, that's your take.
Don't put that on me. I will get hate mail.
Guys, that's at Nate Polvogt right there underneath.
Just DM me. DM me. It's fine.
Absolutely. Here's my question about Chicago for both you guys, and I'll start. Tyler, since this is your guy, I'm gonna start with you. Like with Deontay Foreman there, right? Is he a legitimate threat to really take work away from both guys, or is there some sort of like likelihood that maybe, you know, with the three of them there, it becomes this weird 3-headed monster that really kind of lessens the fantasy value for all three guys? Is there any worry about any of that?
3-headed monster is a strong term for a backfield that already has Justin Fields in it. Like he's their top runner. There's really, I don't know if there's room for two running backs to be fantasy relevant in this offense. Is Deontay Foreman going to be fantasy relevant? Barring injury, no. But his 4 to 5 carries a game is going to take 4 to 5 carries away from either Khalil Herbert or Roschon Johnson. So that, you know, that could be 20 to 30 yards a game. That could be a touchdown. That could be 8 fantasy points in a game. So he's going to be annoying. He's not going to be a fantasy factor, but he's going to be annoying.
Nate, how annoying is he going to be?
Pretty annoying. I really like Deontay Foreman. I do. I love the story. That's the biggest thing for me. It's like, what a cool story. Guy tears his Achilles, and now all of a sudden he's back and relevant. Years past, you don't see that. He's going to be annoying, but I don't think he's going to be annoying enough to where it's like, God, I wish I hadn't taken Khalil Herbert in the 17th round.
All right. Okay. All right, guys. Well, Jamie says that you can put that take on him, and the Mach 144 just dropped from Gators. So, Tyler, you've got something to do on that ADP. You'll get to that later after the show.
I need to yell at someone from Sleeper about their lack of exporting tools.
It is frustrating.
I've made something for it, but it is really annoying. More annoying than Deontay Foreman will be.
Well, I'm sure he's glad to not be the most annoying thing that we talk about on the show. All right, guys. So last but not least, we're talking about Miles Sanders. So this is a kind of a player that I have never really taken a lot of. And honestly, it's just more like a vibes thing for me. Like I never really liked the vibes with Miles Sanders. So I wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive in here and kind of figure out why and see if I still felt that way with him being on a new team. So Miles Sanders, right? He's 26 going into this season. Last season he rushed for over 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. That includes postseason numbers. Obviously, going to the Super Bowl with Philly. He had 300 plus yard games, 4 multi-TD games. Prior to that, his stats were 887 yards 867 yards, 770 yards, and only 9 touchdowns total in his career. So obviously last season, a huge outlier for him. So question I've got is that coming off that last season, best season yet, obviously, Bob Harris jumping on, feels like he's being left out of the annoying conversation. Bob, throw some annoying questions in the chat while you're down there. We'll get to them. So, like I said, Sanders coming off of his best season yet, right? Is he going to sustain that momentum? Are those numbers going to be ones that he puts up in Carolina as well? So, obviously Carolina believes that he is because they gave him a 4-year deal worth $25 million. They let Foreman go to Chicago, like we just talked about, to go be annoying in a different state. His only competition is Hubbard and Blackshear, right? So it's not like they really drafted anybody to come in and kind of fill that role that Foreman had. You've got a rookie quarterback under center. You've got a little itty bitty Bryce Young, who I actually love, even though I called him itty bitty. But Miles Sanders is going to be the first guy that Young looks to if he gets in trouble, right? I kind of feel like, he sees those linemen coming after him and he's going to look to dump that off to somebody, and it's going to be Miles Sanders. I saw a really fun fact while I was doing research for this, and this came from Dynasty Nerds, so shout out to those guys. Frank Reich has never had a second running back that has over 20% of the team's carries. Did you guys know that?
I did not, but now that I think back on it, it makes sense.
Yeah. So, that tells me that he's going to be in a system here where Sanders is going to massively benefit in that role. And, I didn't really think that I was going to come to this conclusion, but I'm kind of digging Miles Sanders this year. I'm kind of in on it. I kind of feel good about it now that I've thought a little bit more about it and kind of did a little bit more research in it. So I am all for Miles Sanders, especially where he's going. You can get him so cheap at this point, especially if you're a 0 RB drafter like I tend to be. Why wouldn't you want a guy that's going to benefit from being pretty much the only game in town? So, and the NFC South sucks, right? Like they're going to have a lot of competitive games there. So maybe it's garbage time, who knows too, but I think he's really going to benefit from that role there in Carolina, and hopefully he keeps up that production level that he had last year. So, Nate, how are you feeling on Miles Sanders? Do you get the bad vibes from him too? Is it just me?
I don't like Miles Sanders.
Okay.
I don't think he's a dude who's capable of being a workhorse back.
All right.
And in the Carolina system, I'm concerned he's just not going to make it through the season, and we're going to end up seeing more Chuba Hubbard than we see of Miles Sanders. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you about like 10 times a day that I'm wrong. I don't see it with Miles Sanders. I really want to. I want him to have that season where he's the bell cow and he's like RB4. The guy has worked super hard. I have nothing against him personally. I just don't see it in this offense, and I don't think he's capable of it. I don't think he's capable of that kind of volume.
Yeah. All right. He's never done it before. So, that's definitely a big concern. Guys, for those of you who have subscribed to fantasyandframes.com, you're going to know that we just dropped a Miles Sanders Dynasty target profile. That was by our very own Zach Berger and Tyler Harrison putting that out. So go on and check it out if you want some more info on Miles Sanders. Last question, last but not least, and this is just for you, Nate. Before you go, I'd like for you to give us somebody whose ADP right now is like blown completely out of proportion. And who that might be. Somebody that we have not discussed tonight.
So this might surprise you, but it is Garrett Wilson. He's currently going as the wide receiver 10.
Spicy.
And like we're all assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to be Aaron Rodgers. He might not be. Like, be prepared. Tom Brady played into his 40s. Aaron Rodgers is 39, going to turn 40 during the season. I'm 41, and I'll tell you right now, despite actually like trying to be in good shape, it gets much harder when you get older. Yeah. Tom Brady is a freak in nature. Drew Brees, he hung it up at 41. I don't know for sure that Aaron Rodgers is going to be good enough to support Garrett Wilson being a wide receiver 1-tier player. And a lot of people are really hanging their hats on it, but there's also a lot of efficiency. And I don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me here. Garrett Wilson was kind of an outlier last season with how well he played with really bad quarterback play. I'll give you that. They brought in Alan Lazard. They brought in Randall Cobb. Aaron Rodgers likes what Aaron Rodgers likes, and he asked for these guys to be brought in. Garrett Wilson will be fine, not wide receiver 10. It's too high.
I have a reoccurring nightmare where Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson just don't vibe, and Rodgers just refuses to throw him the ball all season, and it just tanks all my teams. And I have Garrett Wilson. That is my nightmare.
It's a valid concern, though. We don't know what the dynamic of this Jets offense is going to be, and everybody's assuming it's going to be a pass-heavy dynamic offense. Aaron Rodgers doesn't like pass-heavy dynamic offenses. Look at what Green Bay has done. Slowest pace of play the last 2 seasons in the NFL. So do with that what you will. Garrett Wilson is going too high in drafts.
Oh my goodness. Well, on that is a great spot to end, guys. Nate, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your evening with us and being so generous with your time. Guys, if you are not following Nate, make sure that you jump on Twitter and do that at Nate Polvogt. Over on Twitter, Fantasy Pros, Dynasty Die Hard Podcast. Nate, where else can they find all of your content?
Funny enough, that's about it. I'm helping with the YouTube channel as much as I can with my limited time at Fantasy Faceoff, but check them out at FF Faceoff on Twitter. Great group of guys, Anthony and Aaron and Emerson, great people. And then other than that, I just write an absolute ton for Fantasy Pros. So check it out.
You have anything coming out that you want to share with us?
Actually, nothing too exciting. I did all my exciting stuff this month. I've got a lot of, if you're into high stakes FFPC, I've got a ton of FFPC content. So check that out.
Ooh, I will definitely be checking that out. That's my jam right there. All right, guys. So make sure that you're following all of us on Twitter. You can find Tyler over at FF Tyler Heil. You can find me at Stacy. Hello. That's my name. Stacy_Perez 83, fantasyandframes.com. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. It's been a great night, great show. Thank you all so much for joining in, and we will see you next week.